Hey everyone, welcome back. And today we are actually going to continue The Darkest Minds chapter book by Alexandra Bracken. Today I'm going to be reading chapter 14, but before that, I would truly appreciate it if you guys hit that thumbs up button, and if you're not subscribed already, I would really appreciate it if you guys can subscribe. I do I read pretty much these types of books or other mystery books, horror books, even paranormal, and a little bit of like history and freaky facts. So I would truly appreciate that. And if you honestly love the paranormal, the freaky facts, and things like that, then this is your channel. Now, I'm going to go ahead and read chapter 14, but before I do, please go ahead and get your snacks, get your drinks, sit back, relax. Breathe in through your nose. Count to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4. And breathe out through your mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's do that one more time. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold your breath. 1, 2, 3, 4. And out through your mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, just relax and get started. I slipped off into sleep somewhere between Staunton and Lexington and woke up just in time to get a perfect view of the towering white warehouse that was Roanoke, Virginia's former Walmart. Sure, the blue sign was still clinging desperately to the side of the building, but that was about the only recognizable thing about the supercenter. A number of stray carts wandered across the parking lot aimlessly, carried this and that way, depending on each moody gust of wind. With the exception of a few abandoned cars and green dumpsters, the enormous blacktop parking lot was empty. Against the tangerine blush of the afternoon sun, it looked like the apocalypse had already touched down in Virginia. We were only a stone's throw away from Salem, a 10-minute drive. My stomach clenched at the thought. Once again, Liam insisted on going in alone and checking it out. I felt Zoo's rubber glove on my arm and didn't need to look at her face to know what kind of expression I would find there. She didn't want him charging into what looked like an honest to God hellhole alone any more than I did. This is why you stayed, I reminded myself, to take care of them. And in that moment, the person that needed me the most was the one walking away. I jumped out of bed, my hand gripping at the door handle. Honked the horn 3 times for trouble. I said, and slid the door shut. Liam must have heard, because he waited for me, leaning against one of the rusted shopping cart stalls. Any way I could convince you to go back to Betty? Nope, I said. Come on. He fell in step beside me, fists dug deep in his pockets. I couldn't see his eyes, but the way he was slouching toward the demolished doors was telling enough. You asked me before how I knew about this place, he said, when we were near the entrance. No, it's okay. I know, none of my business. Green, said Liam. It's okay. I just don't know where to begin. You know, Chubbs and I were both in hiding. Well, it wasn't exactly pleasant for either of us. He at least got to stay at his grandparents' cabin in Pennsylvania. But you had the pleasure of holding up in this fine American establishment. Among other places, Liam said. I don't like to talk about that time in front of Zoo. I don't want her to think that that's what her life is going to be. But you can't lie to her, I said. I know you don't want to scare her, but you can't pretend that her life's going to be hard. That her life isn't going to be hard. It's not fair. Not fair. He sucked in a sharp breath, closing his eyes. When he spoke again, his voice had turned to his usual soft tones. Never mind. Forget it. Hey, I said, taking his arms. I get it, okay? I'm on your side. But you can't act like it's going to be easy. Don't do that to her. Don't set her up to be crushed. I was in a camp with thousands of kids who grew up thinking mommy and daddy were always going to be there for them. And we are all coming out of this seriously damaged. Whoa, Liam said, all traces of anger gone. You are not damaged. That I could have protested until I was blue in the face. Whoever had unhooked Walmart's glass sliding doors from their tracks hadn't done a good job of finding a safe place to store them. The shards of glass coated the cement floor, blown out dozens of feet from the black metal frames. We stepped over and through their mangled shapes, entering that small, strange space where the greeter would have been. Next to me, Liam's foot slipped against the shallow dust collected on the floor. I shot an arm out to brace him as he grunted in surprise. Even as I helped him right himself, his eyes remained fixed on the ground, where a dozen footsteps fanned out in the dust. Every shape and size, from the jagged pattern of the sole of a man's hiking boot to the decorative swirly curls left behind by a young child's tennis shoe, all stamped out there like cookie cutters from a fresh spread of dough. They could be old, I whispered. Liam nodded, but didn't pull away from my side. I hadn't fooled either of us. The store's power had been shut off some time ago, and it was clear it had been open to the wild for not too long. And it was clear it had been open to the wild for too long. There was only a second between when we first heard the rattling in the nearby shelves and when Liam jumped in front of me. "It's," I began, but he silenced me with a shake of his head. We watched the shelves, waiting, and when the deer, a gorgeous, sweet thing with a silky caramel coat and big black eyes, came prancing out from behind the overturned magazine racks, Liam and I looked at each other, dissolving into shaky laughter. Liam pressed his finger to his lips and waved me forward, his eyes scanning the dark fleet of identical cash registers in front of us. Someone had taken the cart from the store and tried stuffing them in the lanes, as if to create a kind of fortified wall against any unwanted visitors. Carefully, without disturbing the pileup of plastic baskets, we climbed up and over the nearest register's conveyor belt. Standing on top of it, I could see where more shelves had been lined up in front of the other exit. It looked as though something huge had come slamming through it at once, at one point bursting through the makeshift barricade. What did that? I think there's some part of everyone, PSI or not, that's tuned into the memories of a place. Strong feelings, especially terror and desperation, leave an imprint on the air that echo back to whoever's unlucky enough to walk through that place again. It felt like the darkness was stroking beneath my chin with a beckoning finger, whispering to me to lean forward and know its secrets. Something terrible happened here, I thought, feeling a cold drip down my spine. The wind whistled through the broken doors, playing us the kind of screeching song that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. I wanted to leave. This was not a safe place. This was not a place to bring Zoo or Chubbs, so why was Liam still going forward? Overhead, the emergency lights flickered on and off, buzzing like boxes of trapped flies. Everything beneath them was cast in a sickly green light, and as he moved farther and farther down the first aisle, it seemed like the darkness waiting at the end of it would swallow him whole. I sprung forward into the sea of empty metal shelves, half of which were knocked flat on their backs or leaning against others in slant lines, their shelves buckling under some invisible weight. My sneakers squeaked as I wove through the sea of lotions, mouthwash, and nail polish on the floor. Things that seemed so necessary in the past, so vital to life, wasted and forgotten. When I caught up to him again, my fingers closed around the soft, loose leather of his jacket's sleeve. At the slightest tug, Liam turned. His blue eyes lit up in surprise. I took a step back and pulled my hand back to my side, shocked at myself. It had felt natural to do it. I hadn't been thinking at all, only feeling a very sharp, real need to be close to him. "I think we should leave," I whispered. "Something about this place doesn't feel right." And it had nothing to do with the strange crying of the wind, or the birds high up in the old store's rafters. "We're okay," he said. His back was to me, but he slipped his hand from his pocket. It drifted back toward me, floating up through the darkness. I didn't know whether he meant to motion me to move forward or for me to take it, but I couldn't bring myself to do either. We walked side by side toward the back right corner of the store. It seemed that this section of the store, with all of its hardware and light bulbs had been left somewhat alone, or at least hadn't seemed as useful to the people who had picked the other shelves to the bone. I saw where we were headed immediately. Someone had set up their own little camp using bright blue pool rafts as mattresses. A few empty boxes of graham crackers and hostesses' cupcakes were piled up on top of a cooler, and on top of that was a small wireless radio, a lantern flashlight. Wow, I can't believe this is still here. Liam stood a foot behind me, his arms crossed over his chest. I followed his gaze down to the dozens of indentions in the cracked white tile. They were almost enough to distract me from the patchwork of old bloodstains on the ground beneath his feet. My lips parted. "It's old," Liam said quickly, like that would make me feel any better. Liam reached toward me, forcing a smile. I blew out the breath I had been holding and reached up to take his hand. At almost the exact moment our hands touched, I saw it. The emergency lights above the section of the back wall snapped back to full glare like a spotlight illuminating the enormous black sign painted there, along with a very clear message, "Get out now." The thick, uneven letters looked like they were weeping. The light crackled and went back out with a loud pop, but I still threw myself forward, out of Liam's grip, straight for the spray-painted message, because that smell, the way the words drooped, I pressed my fingers against the PSI symbol, and they came away sticky, black, fresh paint. Liam had only just reached me when I felt the strangest sensation of burning right at my core. I looked down, expecting to see a spark igniting the front of Zoo's ridiculous dress. And then I was falling, and Liam was falling on top of me, bulldozed right over, as if we had been nothing more than two daisies poking up through the cracks in a tile. Liam's shoulder rammed into my chest, knocking the air out of our lungs. I tried to lift my head to see exactly what happened, but there was this weight, this solid, invisible slab of stone keeping me on my back, and Liam flat against me. The floor was freezing at my back, but my entire focus was on the solid press of his shoulder against my cheek. Our hands were caught between us, and for a moment I had the uneasy sensation of not knowing where one of us began and the other ended. He swallowed hard, the pulse in his throat closed enough for me to hear it. Liam moved to lift his head, straining the muscles that lined the strongest column of his spine. "Hey!" he shouted. "Who's there?" Only response was another shove from the invisible hands. Suddenly, we were shooting across the ground, Liam's leather jacket squealing against the dusty floor as we slid. I watched the emergency lights beyond Liam's head pass with dizzying speed, tracking together like a single beam. Riotous laughter followed us down the aisles, seeming to come from below us, above us, on either side. I thought I saw a dark shape move out of the corner of my eye, but it looked more like a monster than a person. We tore through ribbons of ripped shower curtains, the body lotions, the bleach, to the line of cash registers at the front of the store. "Cut it out!" Liam yelled. Where there are some sounds you can there are some sounds you hear once and never forget. A bone breaking, an ice cream truck song, Velcro, a gun's safety clicking off. No, I thought, not now, not here. We slid to a painful stop at the checkout lines, the impact with the metal jarring every sense out of my body. There was a single moment of agonizing silence before the once dead store lights surged into brightness, and then the cash register flashed on, conveyor belts sputtering to life. First one lane, then the next, and the next, every single one, falling to order like soldiers. The numbered signs above blinked between yellow and blue, like a dozen warning signs, faster than my eyes could follow. At first, I thought it was white noise. All at once, the building's security alarms, intercom systems, and televised displays went off. 100 different voices screaming at us. Block after block of ceiling lights snapped on, electricity pouring through them. After years of existing as nothing more than hollow, dusty veins, Liam and I turned to see Zoo, her bare right hand splayed out against a checkout line. Chubbs was next to her, his face a sheen. After only a few seconds of Zoo's power surge, the lights on the registers began to pop like firecrackers, dropping streams of blue-white sparks and glass to the ground. She had only meant for it to be a distraction, I think, a flash and bang to draw the attention of our attackers away from us long enough for an escape. Out the corner of my eye, I could see her waving us toward her, but the machine under Zoo's other hand had heated to a terrifying molten glow. I felt the vision grip on me, slacking suddenly, but fear kept me still as the dead. She wasn't letting go. Liam and I must have had the same thought, the same scorching fear, because we pushed to our feet, shouting for her to stop. "Turn her off," someone managed to shout over the alarms. "Zoo, let go." Liam stood and stumbled over cans of sunscreen and bug spray. From a nearby display, I saw him lift his arms, ready to yank Zoo away from his abilities. With his abilities, Chubbs was faster. He tugged the glove off Zoo's other hand and pulled it over his own. Then he tugged the glove off Zoo's other hand and pulled it over his own. Then all but ripped her arm away from the metal. The lights went out just before the overhead bulbs exploded. I saw Zoo's face as she came out of whatever trance she had been locked in. Her big eyes were rimmed with red, her short black hair on the end, freckles standing out against the full flush of her oval face. The sudden darkness gave Liam the opportunity to knock both her and Chubbs to the ground, and then, by some small miracle, the emergency lights flickered back on. The first sign of movement didn't come from us. I saw our attackers clearly now, climbing over the mangled heaps of white shelves, 4 of them, each dressed in layers of black, each with a gun raised and ready. My first thought, as it almost always was when I saw anyone in a black uniform, was to run, to get the others and bolt. But these weren't PSFs. They weren't even grown-ups. They were kids like us. And that is the end of chapter 14. I want to say also, I apologize for any errors, like when I'm saying or reading. I do apologize. That's kind of why I try to go back. But I do hope that you like this chapter. And we are actually, the next video should be a little bit longer than this one. So yeah, definitely please like this video and subscribe if you haven't. And have a good day or night. Ruby out.